And I couldn't have imagined prior to that our slow production time would benefit us in that way. No, it's a massive issue. And no one seems to solve it, and no one seems to talk about it, and no one is addressing it. So I need to address it. And when you're changing a market, you're going to be quite misunderstood. Just because you neglect the problem, it doesn't go away. It's not always super fun to be alone.
Hi, and welcome to the 7-Figure Foundation series, in which we are going to talk with e-commerce founders and owners. And today we have Josefin Liljeqvist. And thank you for coming. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And if you're new here for this series, in this series we want to show the face behind the e-commerce brands, because nowadays e-commerce has a bit of a cold face. People feel like, okay, there are all these brands out there and they're using tactics to make us buy, these impulse buys that maybe regret later on. But there are also a lot of brands and a lot of kind of founders and owners who really started a brand with a passion, and they still drive to this day their brand with that passion, and they are real people, they have good hearts, and they have a real solution for a problem that they want to solve. And Josefin is one of those founders, and I'm really happy and honored that she is part of this series and wants to share with us her story, and also to share with you the struggles that she had and the problems that you need to overcome, but also what helps to keep you motivated to actually continue in this hard world, in this hard e-commerce industry, to strive every day to do a bit of a better job and to really keep your brand afloat. So we're going to talk today about the brand Josefin Liljeqvist. It's also the name of the brand. And yeah, again, thank you for being here. And I'm really happy that you want to share your story, because you have a story behind your brand. You have a purpose that I think is really awesome. So my first question would also be like what inspired you to create the brand? Like, tell me a bit more about the brand and the mission it has.
Yes, of course. Well, it's lovely to be here and having this chat. So the company name is Josefin Liljeqvist, and we're a conscious fashion tech company within the luxury area. But we have a really clear mission, and that is to improve global animal protection. So basically, I just love animals. I've been working with animal protection since I was 11. I was running around, trying to save all the pandas in the world. And
Pandas are so cute.
basically, mom had to drive me around to all neighbors and be like, hey, buy these towels for the pandas. And I just continued doing that as I grew up. And after I educated myself to become a designer, a footwear and fashion designer, I went into the industry to design, and I just felt like my ethics and the ethics of the fashion industry were a bit off. So I went back to WWF again. I worked as a public fundraiser on the streets of Stockholm, and I was helping to raise funds for a new drone system to prevent poaching in Africa.
All right.
And the reason why that story is kind of our backstory is because when I was standing there, you have to have some kind of hook, because otherwise people just pass you by in the street. And my hook was, how many elephants die every hour? And either you got a guess, and then you got some money that people signed up to give, maybe 100 crowns, 200 crowns a month, or they did something that became like the core of this business. And they said, do you know that you're an awful person?
Oh, wow. That's quite a thing to hear.
Yeah, and the first time you're like, oh, the person had a bad day, and then it continued. So every day it happened, and I was like, what's happening? And then I asked, and they said, well, humans are meant to work for humans. Humans are not meant to work for animals because they're not important.
Okay,
And
that's an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, it's really interesting, but it's also when so many people say it, and it's in a highly educated country such as like Sweden, and it's in Stockholm. I was starting to understand that this is a point of view that a lot of people actually have, that animals are not important. And I also looked at it from like a macro lens, and like if an organizations like WWF are getting these kind of comments on their work, maybe we need to move away from like an ethics driven, like, oh, if you have 5 crowns over, give money, and instead try to implement animal protection as core of businesses, like core of a business model and doing good. And that's kind of
Yeah.
what inspired everything. Like, can we take this core and just move it to an industry not known for its ethics, fashion? And can fashion then be a catalyst of change for animal protection and kind of driving that change forward? And that was the core of what became the brand later on, just creating that traceability between, like, why is animal important in an fashion-based product.
Yeah, and took quite some guts, I think, to start that. Because how did you know that that would be something that could work?
Well, I didn't, and I think that's the thing. It didn't exist, and we're still very solo in addressing animal protection in this matter. And I think it's the lack of market that knew that I needed to do it. It wasn't because, like, oh, there's a massive market here, it's a booming market, it's a billion. It's more like, no, it's a massive issue, and no one seems to solve it, and no one seems to talk about it, and no one is addressing it. So I need to address it, and I need to be part of that change that I think the world should have, and that the world and the animals need.
So instead of finding a market, you decided to create your own market, basically.
Yeah, let's make it easy, right?
Yes. Why do it the easy way?
Yeah.
um, but kind of then, how did the early days look like for you to get it all started up and to see, like, is this idea viable?
Well, so it started. I've been in the footwear industry since I was roughly, like, what can I be, 15 years old. My parents used to own Sweden's oldest shoe shop. So, like, I started there learning like everything you can know about the trade except for designing, which I then did in
Hmm.
school. So I felt like I had really good connections to kind of set up some kind of value chain. But it was much more difficult. I thought in 6 months we were going to have a traceable production, but it took us 5 years to kind
Wow.
of set everything together. The easy part was getting shareholders in. Like, everyone was
Hmm.
really positive, and it's also hard when you're doing something good that people like, oh, it's bad. They want to be part of it. They want to be able to earn more money about linked to treating animals better. Like, it's a good core. So it was easy to get the shareholders in, but the tricky
Hmm.
part was getting data from shareholders and developing a system that worked, because it's not always about who develops the best technical solution for shareholders. It's about, what are you as a transportation person maybe okay to push? Like, do you need one button? And that could differ from if you're an artisan. And we have a really long value chain, because we have the design table, we have the farmers, transportation, the slaughterhouses, the salteries, the tanneries, the artisan, and then we have the entire consumer value chain, and then second life. So it's a really long
Hmm.
one. And to
Yeah.
develop something that works, so you just get the bare minimum and some data out of each party, was the most difficult part, I would say.
And can you share a bit more how that works? I mean, it is a very complex system. I mean, it took you 5 years to build. So I don't know if it's possible to explain this in a few sentences, but could you give an idea of how that system works and what your biggest bottleneck was besides getting those data points?
One thing that was really tricky, and it took us a lot of years to kind of figure out, what the pain point was, because we were having issues in, you know getting it to flow and getting it to function, but I couldn't really quite figure out where the pain point really was. And then in design, you have something called a technical specification. So if you design a footwear, for example, in my case, you have then your sketch of your footwear and then a technical specification. And this breaks down all the technical elements of the footwear.
Hmm.
So it can be, how is the sole? Should there be blind eyelets, etc. And then we could collect traceability data linked to that from the shareholders, but we needed a way to combine the design with the supply chain and with the repair system. Because if you buy a traceable footwear, for example, and it breaks over a while, naturally you don't want to resole it with non-traceable leather. You want to keep the traceability
Yeah.
intact.
Yeah.
So you need to think of that on the design table level. And we couldn't really figure out the logistics. And then we developed something called an ethical specification. And the ethical specification breaks down the impact of the product, because 90% of a garment or a design's impact is decided on the design table, which is pretty cool. So you can really do some good things there. And when we broke it down to these ethical specification, we actually noticed that we got sourcing details. We knew which farm to contact. We knew, how to put the orders in at each party in the supply chain. So I would say that one really solved it. So I would say there's the ethical specification in combination with just getting bare minimum data out of each shareholder, so everyone want to just keep working on it, was very key for us.
All right, yeah, because basically, if I buy a pair of shoes from you, I can literally look up every piece that where the shoe is made up of and see where it came from. So I actually know that it is sustainably sourced, that it's an ethical, basically, how do you say it? An ethical part of the shoe, and it's not just something that you say, but you can actually prove it. You can actually see it with the data that you have.
Yeah, exactly. So on each product that we design, we add something. Currently in the European Union Green Deal, it's called a digital product passport, but that's so new that we kind of did this prior. So we call them digital IDs or RSIDs. So it's responsible systems identification, because that's our technology solution that we developed as a company. And basically it's a 6-digit combination of like letters and numbers, and it's printed on the product. And then, for example, say that you have a pair of shoes, you can activate the code, and then you get a 3D model, and you can just press it, like blow it apart, and you can press like, oh, what's the sole coming from? And then you can see, oh, it's this farm, it's these farmers, this is the map where it's located, this is their animal welfare philosophy, it's their sustainability philosophy, and you can just do that to all parts and just learn about, what is actually the animal protection behind this product that you purchased, even if it is animal derived.
So it's not necessarily that each shoe has a story, but each shoe has multiple stories in that way. Really,
Yes.
from
Quite a
where
lot.
you can trace origin back to all the different kind of farms and places where it came from. That's very interesting. It's something that people don't usually think about when they buy their stuff. Of course, they want to know, especially if you care about sustainability and eco-friendly material, etc. You want to know, like, okay, was it sourced properly, or also did people get fair wages, etc. But you can really get to the level of detail here. That's very interesting. It's very new. Do you have a lot of
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
also about like customers who actually wonder like how it all works?
Well, we have a really slow process. So like we're like very the opposite of that, which means that, once you buy something from us, you actually get some updates like, oh, now the artisan has started making your sole, now they're making your upper. And we have a pretty long period of time from when you place an order until you actually receive your footwear. So in that case, you also get some information during the production process, like, oh, now everything is shipped to Italy where our artisan partners work. So you get the production info like while it's in production, but then you get the letter data once the product has been assembled and you actually got them home. But what we also do is that we collaborate with restaurants. So we do pickup places,
All right.
because something that's really important in this company is that we get data from agriculture, because agriculture has core data. But the issue globally is that agriculture data does not get moved over to fashion. So you have a lot of data going on here, and then you have like a black box, which is fashion, and that's why traceability is so difficult. So you have to just fuse them, which do so. In order to do that, we actually collaborate with restaurants. Then, so if you buy a footwear from us, you can go to specific restaurants that we've handpicked, to just know, oh, and here you can buy traceable, it can be meat or sustainably sourced chocolate. So it's just about fusing these two industries together, so you feel like you're part of the change. You're not just buying
Yeah.
shoes.
Oh, that's an interesting. So you could basically also eat at a restaurant that maybe has the same, maybe meat of the kind of the material where your shoe is made off of. Is that like how it also can be?
Yeah, well, like if you extend it, yes. We don't have that currently because they don't source from the same farms that we do. But yes,
Hmm.
an extension it could be, and one of the farms actually have a restaurant. So in that case, it could be very tied together.
Okay, that's very interesting. And so you basically take them along with the journey. So you actually have updates about how your shoe is being made. So you feel probably also a kind of part of it as a consumer. Does it create a certain customer loyalty, or does it create a certain connection with your customer?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I think we have to ask the customers that. I believe so, based on what they've told me. But it's always hard to answer that one for someone else. But
Hmm.
I know that once we put it and I realized, okay, we're going to have a really long delivery process. I was like, this is not going to be good for sales and pre-sales. And then I was at this event and I was talking to a person. I introduced what I was doing, and then was like, "Oh, I heard about you yesterday," and this was a couple of years back. And I was like, "Okay, what did you hear?" She's like, "Aren't you the ones doing shoes that's traceable?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And then apparently one of our customers who had bought a shoe and he had to wait like a year to get it. He was
A
at this
year.
bar and yeah, yeah, and he told everyone, he's like, "Oh, I bought this new pair of shoes and they're traceable." And naturally, people were like, "Oh, let me see them." And then he said, "No, I don't have them. They're going to make them for me." And then he kind of created this narrative where it was, cool that he had to wait, and he told them about our process. And I couldn't have imagined prior to that our slow production time would benefit us in that way, that it would actually create storytelling from the customers.
Yeah.
Um,
It actually helps probably also with the luxury feel. Like, I'm just not buying a pair that everyone can just grab right now from a store. They're actually being customly made and they're being sourced for me. And, I'm willing to wait for that because it's going to be a product that I fully stand behind, but also the quality and the ethics behind it is just like, is amazing.
yeah, exactly. You have the ethics and you have the craftsmanship and you have them combined, so you can actually be part of that. It feels like you're part of something, a good change.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And so you also told me about like the challenge that you had with setting it all up, also the traceability to get
Mhm.
that data. Was there a point where you were like, this is getting so complex, maybe I should just give up, maybe I should like try something else?
Yeah, well, isn't that, it doesn't. I think that happens too often sometimes, because it's just when it's different when you are trying to build just a business. Like when you're trying to
Yeah,
build a
but
business.
I hear it a lot from everyone that I talk to. They all say yeah, I've had times like that I want to give up,
Mm,
and yet you don't.
yeah,
Like, why don't you stop? Like, what motivates you? I think that's such an interesting thing that you have kind of what, this inner motivation or this drive. What made you then continue?
yeah. I I think it's 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 a it's a few different elements, I would say. So one, it's I've looked at the market. I don't feel anyone is kind of taking the torch from me. Like, I would be okay to kind of stop if I could hand it over to someone who I feel genuinely would help animals increase animal protection over time. So like, I don't have to care about it. Like, someone else can solve it in a way that actually helps the animals, then I would be okay to be like, I can take a break. I don't feel like that's happening on what I'm seeing on the market. So I think that has been a very big driver for me. Every time I'm like, okay, well, we're not just building a business, we're trying to create a global market shift. And it's like,
Yeah,
we're not that many and we don't really have that much funding. And like, okay, shit, this is big. And then I'm like, well, we just have to keep going because no one else is doing it. And we believe that the world needs better ethics. And I truly believe that the only way to improve ethics is to find a way where it's more profitable to be kind, because I think
Uh,
otherwise we have, yeah.
it requires a lot of courage as well. I mean, you see a problem, and you're not like, and responsibility. I think accountability. Like you see a problem, you see like, hey, this should be better, and a lot of people. And I'm not saying that I never make those kind of mistakes myself, but are like, yeah, it would be great if it's solved, but not by me. I don't want
Yeah,
to go through that hassle. Like it's a pain. Like, but you are not like that. You're like, okay, there's this problem. Nobody is doing it, or at least not in the scale that it needs to happen, or not in the detail. So, like, screw it, I'll just do it. Like,
yeah.
I think that's really remarkable, and I think like that somehow is that your motivation, that you're like, well, I have to do it because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, I actually talked to one of our brand ambassadors about it. We have a few goodwill brand ambassadors, which is lovely people who do a lot of impact within. It can be agriculture, or it can be in film, or in fashion, and etc. And then we talked about it, and we said, how nice wouldn't it be if we were a small community? Like, so when someone is really drained of energy, we can just hand over the torch to someone else for like a month, and then we can give it
Uh-huh.
back. And he's like,
Doesn't
well,
work
maybe we
like
should.
that.
No, but we said it would be really good, because we both felt, we thought impact could happen quicker then, because then we can kind of help each other out when we're like, oh, I know your area, I can take over for a month and help you in this one, and then you can help in this area,
Yeah.
because I think that's how impact happens. We have to. There's this famous saying that everyone say, like, go fast, go alone, and like, um, what is it, go along, go together, or something like that. And I do think it is, when we come together and we help each other, and we push each other and we motivate each other, that's kind of when we can persevere and get through the other side, which is the impact we want to see.
And do you also have that in a team that helps you with it? Like, or do you sometimes also feel a bit alone in this journey?
Uh, yeah. Well, I'm a solo founder, so I think there comes a certain aloneness with that one. But recently, I've taken in. We're a small team, but recently I've taken in a co-owner who is operational. So
All right.
even if I'm still kind of solo founder, it feels more like if there's a big thing I want to discuss, we're actually two people solving it. Doesn't just fall on me, which was a lovely thing. And we're working together for a while now, so that really helps with the loneliness thing, even if it can still come, when you're solving
Mm-hmm.
something big. But it helps to kind of discuss it with someone else who doesn't
Bounce off
just,
ideas.
yeah, and also who doesn't just be like, oh, that's an issue. What do you want me to do? Instead of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's solve it together, because sometimes that can be the thing. If you're a solo founder, it comes to you to solve a lot of things as well. When it comes to, can be finances, or platform, or tech, or all these kind of elements that a fashion tech company, an impact company, is made out of.
And did you have a certain, I don't know, way of thinking, or a system, or a framework when you encountered a problem that, because when you start a business, you're not fluent in everything, in every aspect of the business. You might be strong, maybe you have a knack for finance, but maybe not in the whole operational side of things. Like, how did you manage to sort it all out?
I think a really good thing is, when you really believe in something, you should just figure it out. I think it's a good thing, because I think if you get too much into the strategic thing in the beginning, you become passive instead of like just pushing through and figuring out as you go along. I think it's the best tactic,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you might end up thinking like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's bad. Just keep going, and finally you're going to figure it out a bit more, because the majority of people don't have it all figured out. But it's just important of keep going, and then whatever, when you're stuck, just ask people around you. Like, in where I live in Uppsala, we have a great innovation system. So like in the earlier years, I was in there, and then you had access to mentorship, you had access to how do you do. I never done that myself, but for example, if you had issues like bookkeeping and those kind of
Mm-hmm.
elements, but in elements where I know what I'm really not the strongest, I try to add someone else that can help out with that one, because I know I'm stronger in other areas. And of
Yeah.
course, sometimes you have to do the things you're not good at, but just try to avoid not doing them for super long.
Yeah.
Because it can drain the other elements that you're working on that you love or that you're better at.
So kind of go head first so that you have to figure it out. Like, if you try to make it perfect from the start, drafting up a plan, it might paralyze you as well, I think. And like you said, makes you passive. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. Like, don't be afraid to ask someone to give you a helping hand. And
Yeah.
I think that's good. And I also like recently spoke with someone else who also said, like, I just went in head first, and then you have to try and sort it out. You don't have a choice. I think that's the difference between people who have a lot of plans, big plans and dreams, and the ones who are living it. The ones who are actually doing it. They just go in and they try to figure it out. And in the end, you learn a lot. You make a lot of mistakes, but you
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, but
but
what's your biggest mistake? But like, if you look back, you're like, really, I should have done that differently.
What's one that pops to mind? We for
Is it
first
difficult to
years when
choose
we
from all the different ones?
no, I tend to forget them a bit. I don't know if it's a
Okay.
good thing or a bad thing. Some
It's a good
kind of
thing.
linger, but but there's one that, because it gave me a lot of issues. So we were in our first years, we had a different artisan partner. It was a lovely partnership for a few years while we did prototyping, and then they had some internal changes, and then they started basically charging us for things we hadn't ordered. So like they overcharged. And they were so important because they were really like a key player. So I didn't want to, I just paid it. I was like, let's just, I'm you're happy, I'm happy, perfect, let's continue. And then we're at the situation where like shit, we didn't have any funds. We had like minus on the account. Like it was not good. And we were at this phase where we had pre-orders, we had quite a few of them, but we didn't have the funds to deliver on them because we had one traceability element that was left. And
Hmm.
then I reached out to them and basically like, hey, I know you overcharged us on, our last invoice. Do you mind repaying the part that's overcharged, or, getting a free sample or something like that? And it just blew up in the wrong direction, and they burned our things.
Oh, wow.
So basically, we got thrown back a couple of years.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, looking back, of course, you should always, there should always be a business element, because otherwise you can't have a business. But I'm thinking maybe if we hadn't been like desperately low on money at that stage, I may not have focused on trying to get that overcharge back. Be just understanding that, okay, I know we're overcharging, you're overcharging us, we're both happy because we make it work. um, but doing that, yeah, that set us back a really long time, and then we had to restart everything. We luckily could redo everything in like 6 months,
Hmm.
but it became more costly than I wanted it to be. So
They
that
also
was
don't
a
expect that it kind of explodes that way, you know? I mean, you can expect it like an awkward conversation, but to
yeah,
do it
yeah.
like
I
that.
would. Yeah, I couldn't really have expected kind of the direction it would take, and then once you're in it, you're like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah. But is it something that if you would have handled it differently, like if you said like, okay, I kind of would have accepted it, I would have found another way to sort it out, would you still be working with them right now?
um, I'm thinking. I know that maybe. I think it depends. Like there was shift in their internal affairs, and the one we set up afterwards is a better choice for us. But the one that we had prior was a really great choice because it was a more well-known choice. The other one was
Hmm.
even more niche as an artisan. Um, but we got the same kind of quality. I think how we could have been handled differently, and I think it's a good thing maybe to other founders to think of, is that just because you neglect the problem it doesn't go away. Like at some
Mm-hmm.
stage, you have to bring up the issue, and it's better
Yeah.
to do it sooner than later. And what I learned was bring up problems earlier. Maybe in the first time they overcharge us, if I would have said, "Hey, I know this is an overcharge. Like, let's fix it," it might have also solved our finances a bit more.
Yeah.
But since I was so desperate with having them because they're so well known that it really helped our brand, I just went along with things maybe I shouldn't. We as a brand shouldn't have gotten along with for a while.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. Like sometimes you also feel like, I don't want to make it a big thing, or there are so many things that you need to, like so many fires you need to put out in a day. Like maybe that one, I let it be, but the longer you let it be, the more difficult it gets to bring it to the table, and to kind of say like, hey, but this should change. And like, if it already has happened for months like that, it gets to be a bit of a, like someone's also a bit, you train someone to kind of be able to do that behavior because you kind of were okay with it. So that I also see it sometimes, with our clients that, something needs to change. And if you let it too long,
Yeah.
it's just the more difficult it gets. It's true. It kind of festers, it grows, it gets a bit more unmovable. I think that's a great tip. Do you have, by the way, any other tips or strategies that you like? If you're new to the ecom game, for example, uh, really like use this strategy, or like avoid doing this, or try doing that, which maybe helped you a lot.
Well, I would say I think a massive thing we did on our first ecom actually was that we didn't put a very senior person on helping choosing the platform because we had a lot of customization at that point, and we had a
Hmm.
microservice architecture. And at that stage, there were very few ecom platforms that could handle customization and microservice architecture, and we built too much customized, which meant that um, once we wanted to go in and just do minor changes, we really always needed a coder or someone. We
Hmm.
didn't. It just become too tech heavy too quickly
Yeah.
for us. I think if there was, if I would have a redone it, I would have paid actually more of a senior person and be like, "This is our issue. Can you look at a solution that's cost efficient? This is what we expect to, have for a sale at this stage." Instead of trying to, keep the cost lower for the research phase, which mean that we had to
Hmm.
pay more for dev, and then in the end we had to redo it because it became too tech heavy. So I would say it's better to take that initial cost when it comes to ecom with someone who has great skill sets within your area, and just pay them to kind of help you choose a good solution, one that you can take you from like A to B and maybe to C, and then you can scale it and change it, instead of keeping the cost down in research and then you have to pay more for dev. So I would say that's a good lesson that I learned.
That's also a big pain point that you're kind of touch upon here, because it's a difficult balance to find. Like, if you, for example, don't have a lot of funds, you tend to look at, okay, how can I do this more low cost? But usually for the long run, for the long term, it's better if you say like, okay, but like I need to invest a bit more now so that later on it will save me a ton of hassle and
Mm.
actually also a ton of money. Uh, but in the short term, that's more of an investment. And I think that's what a lot of brands are also struggling with. Like, is it such a priority for me right now? Should I spend this amount? And it will probably also not be the only thing that is costing money. That would be an investment. So I think, yeah, really really sit down and think like, okay, what makes most sense for me right now? What do I really need? And usually, especially with dev work and your online store, like it's always very costly if you need to change it later on, because you already have in the time past invested so much time into making tweaks, into like uploading products and things like that, that making that switch then is, yeah, it's better to build it up right, and with a long-term view from the get-go. I think that's a really good advice that you give here. Yeah. And if you could give yourself an advice, like if you could go back to the Josephine that was 5 or maybe 10 years ago, what would you tell her? Like, hey, do this.
I would say it's what you're trying to do is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So when you're looking at strategies and implementing business decisions, you need to look at it more as a marathon. And when you're changing a market, you're going to be quite misunderstood because that's why it's called a market change. That's why you're
Yeah.
making a new market. And you have to be very okay with being an outsider for a really long time, and it's okay. I think I would have appreciated if someone had told me that very clearly because I had to figure it out myself. Um, and I think it could help someone else also who does a market shift and a market change in the way that we're doing when it comes to animal protection traceability.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's really good advice, and it probably that also resulted in you sometimes maybe feeling a bit like alone in like trying to solve that issue, because there were not other people that were doing the same thing as you,
Yeah.
or maybe always understood what you do. Not everyone every day is trying to do something market changing. So yeah, it is something that probably also you now can tell your younger self because you went through it all. It's always a bit of the paradox as well. But I think that that's really good advice maybe for people that are now looking at this and be like, yeah, that's something I want to do. There's a problem that there's no solution for, or nobody's willing to tackle it, and I just need to accept like, okay, I might be an outsider, and that's okay.
Yeah, because I think like especially when it comes to like social media and people looking at TV, maybe they're looking at I think it's called like Dragon's Den and like those kind of things. It's it's sometimes so desirable to be like, oh, I'm the first on the market. I'm like, no, it's not always super fun. It's not always super fun to be alone, and
Yeah.
and it's quite rare that you don't have like competition. Like of course we have indirect competition. We have a lot of other companies doing traceability. We have other companies doing circular design solutions. We have, of course, other retail companies. But like the way we're putting it together is very unique, which also means
Mm-hmm.
that you are quite alone. And then when you're saying like, "Oh, we're first," that means, yeah, if you're first, you're alone. And then
Yeah.
you have to be like, is that what you really want to drive, or do you want to be somewhere maybe you have some competition because that means you will also have an easier market adaptation and it will be easier to grow and you like find your um, like stability because you can look at someone else and say, oh, they did it like that. Like we have to look at what did Tesla do, for example, like what happened in this area. We can't really look that much in fashion. We have to look at other markets
Mm-hmm.
that more sustainability shifts.
Yeah, and it sounds cool to be the first one, right? Especially when you look at established brands who did it and are successful, but usually they don't look at the pain and the disappointment and the setback that actually led to that moment, right? You have to go through the pain in order to get there,
Exactly.
and that's not always as pretty as it may look on the
No,
front end. Yeah. All
but
right. Yeah.
isn't that kind of the beauty also where kind of art or impact comes from? Like I think it needs to be fueled by something real, and I think that's how we fuel it, right?
Well, and that's also I think what helped you get here, like what you saw in the world, and you said like, okay, the animal cruelty that there is, and we need to just own our shit, and we need to do a better job, and no one else is doing it, and so yeah, there's no one taking it like taking the torch from me. I have to do it myself. And I think that's why I love you that you are here on this series, because there's a lot of e-commerce brands out there as well that don't have that kind of a passion. And I think it's so important that you have that to get through those setbacks, to power through, like find something that kind of fuels your fire, that keeps you going, because there are going to be setbacks and there are going to be disappointments and there are going to be probably some tears as well. And if you know why you're doing it and what you're doing it for, then you also can take that next step and take the other step and take the other step. And then slowly, you get out of that slump. And then you look back and you're like, you know, I did it, I got there, I got through it.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah. Well, Josephine, thank you for being on the series. I really love your story and your resilience that you also have shown, and that you took us with us for a little bit on the journey that you've had, and your valuable tips for everyone out there. And yeah, I wish you like all the best, and I hope that more is going to follow, that more brands are going to be out there that say like, hey, this is what we sell, and actually you can just trace it where it's from. Like, we're not just trying to sell you a nice fairy tale. You can actually just check that this is sustainably sourced, that this did not result in cruelty towards animals or people or nature. So I think that you're maybe one of the first ones, but definitely, hopefully, not the last one.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I truly hope that. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. It's been a lovely conversation.